Valentina Shevchenko retains her flyweight title by defeating Taila Santos via, I think it was split decision. Okay, BC, how'd you score it, number one? And what is the biggest story from this fight?
Okay, I think the biggest story isn't the scoring. That's the second biggest story. I scored it 3-2 for Valentina, and the key swing round there is round 2. I get when you're watching a fight like this and you see her do very little offensively in the first 3 rounds, and you see her in rounds 1 and 2 in particular on her back, naturally you're like, well, Taila Santos dictated the terms of this fight. But this is something I got caught into at times, bringing a boxing scoring mentality into the MMA game. Luke, we know it's about damage at the end of the day. So when we're going with that way, round 2 cannot be for Taila Santos. I'm sorry. Valentina got the best of it on the feet. When Valentina was down, she was way more active from the bottom, landing strikes over her head during the choke attempts, and she briefly had a triangle choke on, so there was a submission threat there. Santos was so...
Gogo Plata.
You can get me on the terms. I heard it both ways. But so, you know, when you're in this point in round 2, you took me off track there. What I'm trying to say is, and Taila was so inactive that Goddard actually stood her up after warning multiple times. So round 1... So there's one judge that gave it 49-46. And right away,
Herzog, but go ahead.
Right away, Luke, when you hear 49-46, you go, oh, okay, you know, the champ got the wrong, you know, it is Herzog, you're right.
Yeah, he was.
You know, how could you do it 4-1? But let's be fair, even round 1, which I scored to Taila, but it was a lot closer than people realized. Luke, you don't get credit for taking someone down and doing nothing. You don't get over credit for that.
I'm gonna split the difference with you.
And I don't think she was offensive at all in those 2 rounds. For the most part, dude, I'm telling you.
Skeptical hippo.
Okay, so I scored round 1 for her, but I could see where a judge could be watching that under the actual letters of the law of how the scoring is written.
Yes, that's true.
And say, you know what, I give her round 1 too, but I gave it 3-2 because I gave Valentina round 2. I'd urge you to rewatch round 2, knowing how the rules actually are, and score that for Santos. Luke, she did nothing with the position at all. So let's credit Valentina for rallying, but what do I think is the biggest story in this fight? That Valentina is a superhero, but she's human. And even people like me need to slow the roll a bit. In the right matchup, as we saw, somebody with physicality, like Jennifer Maia had, who had certain levels of success taking Valentina down, wasn't able to turn that into offense like Taila wasn't. But if you're big, you can take on damage, and let's give Santos credit, that headbutt in round 3, which I do believe changed the tenor of this fight. It forced Santos into a survival mode for at least another round and a half. I do think that headbutt broke her orbital bone.
Yes,
so she had to be crazy tough to put on that performance, and let's give her credit. She took Valentina down and humanized her. Luke, there is a hole in Valentina's game. As much as we love her offensive wrestling against Andrade to completely neutralize her, now that is 2 opponents who opened up a potential lane to victory, and in this case made it way too close for comfort for Valentina. So to the letter of the law, I believe she won it. To the letter of the law, 2 of the 3 judges believe she won it, despite people at home, and I get why, saying they thought it was Santos. But I didn't love how nonchalant Valentina was after the fact. How
very Aldo versus Korean Zombie.
Yeah, how, like, you know, how else would you score it? Now, she didn't say that, and I'm not saying that there's not some mixture of, like, nerves, you know, like relief that she didn't get the loss mixed with embarrassment. I don't know what's going on. But she was very much like, oh, yeah, I did what I had to do and I won the fight. No, that was very, very close with the other fighter having an argument to victory. The other fighter winning 1 of 3 scorecards. When in reality, ability to ability, Luke, I don't think they were that close. When Valentina had to put her foot on the gas and put it on her offensively, she was able to do that. Was she exposed to some degree compared to the letter of perfection that we're comparing her to? Yes, she was exposed a little bit and came back down to earth, Luke.
Yeah, look at the scorecards here. The only scorecard all 3 judges gave Santos was round 3.
Yes.
David Letheby, again, I don't have my glasses, I apologize. He gave the first 3 rounds to Santos, the last 2 to Valentina. Clemens, I think it's Werner, but Werner, he is a very good judge. He gave 4, that's the 49-46. Yep. So all the folks being like, oh, how can these judges do it? I would argue the very best of the 3 gave it 49-46.
And again, rewatch round 1. That's also in consideration as a flip-flop round.
And then Howard Hughes gave rounds 1 and 3 to Santos, which is justified, I think, in my view, and then rounds 2, 4, and 5. So let me say a couple things here. I totally agree with you about, listen, I saw something kind of interesting. When her face was broken, and I remember that they let her go out for the 4th round, I tweeted, I was like, at the end of the 4th, because at that point it was swelling. And she looked like she'd been stung by a bee or something.
I'm surprised she finished the fight. I'm serious.
So
because she
looked
she looked like she was ready to quit. And I don't mean that in a disparaging way. I mean, like, she had a broken eyeball.
Could you blame her?
What I mean?
It literally looked like she was doing this.
Yes.
Like the whole time. She couldn't do anything. Like Popeye out there or something.
But she also didn't get taken advantage of. And this was a Valentina rallying. So Santos, did Santos overachieve on toughness, or did Valentina come back down to earth, or a little bit of both?
I think a little bit of both. I think the thing I was going to say was, for me, the UFC has a job to promote fighters, and they promote them a certain way. And Shevchenko has had a few wins, like the amazing win over Eye, and then the armbar of Pena. And there's been some other ones as well that have been dramatic and important and impactful, and they have turned her into something that she's not. What I mean by that is they've tried to present her as like a superhero. She's perfect. She's a knockout machine. Well, she's not perfect, and she's not a knockout machine. She is an incredibly talented, deserving champion, but she's a human being, and there's been a little bit of buying into the mythology that people have sold her.
I've been banging that drum, and you can take my sticks away.
And here's a great, that's okay.
I'm gonna bang with my hands now.
You gotta be the Def Leppard with the guy with the. I'm sorry, you set it up for me. It was what it was. But the point I wanted to make, BC, is I saw something that fans do a lot, which was at the end of the fourth round. By the way, how about that ringside physician being like, "Yeah, she can see. Fuck it." I was like, remind me to never get medical care there.
Did he speak Portuguese at all? I think he was just sort of like.
He literally looked at her. He goes, "Can you see?" And what is she going to say for her? She's like, "Yeah, I can see." Meanwhile, it's like, can you see? Or, yeah, I can see. It's like, yeah, fuck it, let it roll. But the point I wanted to make was I tweeted being like, dude, I was really worried for her health, because if you get it broken, it can affect your eyesight permanently. Remember Billy Joe Saunders, after he got hit with the Canelo shot, and they had to go they had to pull the eyeball out at the doctors for a surgery, reconstruct the inside of the socket, then put the eye back in, and it changed everything. Dude, that will change your career. It could change your quality of life. And I was saying to myself, like, Jesus Christ, this is really dangerous. And I saw people being like, oh, it'd be a shame if this fight was stopped. No, it was a shame that the fight continued, actually. I credit Santos and her toughness. I believe in that. And I understand her team's perspective as well, being like, she literally might never get here again. I understand that. But from a medical standpoint, you got to treat these guys not as superheroes, not as invincible machines. They are humans. They have frail and fragile biology, and we have to take that into consideration. And also, they are imperfect creatures. But here's what I wanted to say. I actually think the 49-46 scorecard is entirely justifiable based on the current scoring criteria. Yes. I also believe that 48-47 for Shevchenko was, or I should say 2 rounds for Santos is justifiable. And by the way, did you see what Shevchenko said afterwards? We always talk about how these fighters and these coaches and these managers and these luminaries, these commentators, never seem to know the scoring criteria. But when she was asked about
these Joe Rogans.
Well, in fairness, up to
Did you see that clip in question, though?
Oh, where he was talking to Aljamain?
Where Joe was like, I got a great idea.
There should be all these changes. It's like, bro, this changes have been around since
6
Obama
years.
was in office. What the fuck are you talking about? All right, but the point I wanted to make was, Shevchenko got out there at the post-fight press conference and was like, look, damage is the name of the game. She appears to understand what the scoring criteria is. And again, you can like the scoring criteria or you cannot like it, but if you're going to have to fight under it, it's best to know what it is. But here is one point I wanted to make, BC. I believe that the scoring criteria as it's currently implemented, why did the Association of Boxing Commissions do it the way that they did, and why did other states adopt it? Because they needed a coherent system by which judges could make a proper evaluation of what was happening in a contest. They tried to make an assessment from a value standpoint about what they thought was important and what was not as important, and they tried to create a hierarchy around that. And I think that they achieved that, but this is what I wanted to say. BC, I think they've gone a little far. Mm-hmm. All right? They have turned grappling from what the equivalent in grappling would be, from a points-based system where you get points for a takedown, points for a pass, points for a back take, advantage for a near submission.
They overcorrected from the Lamprey days.
And then they went all the way to like sub-only, where at a sub-only tournament, literally the only thing that matters is the sub. Let me make a point. I don't know how relevant it would be in this particular fight. And I will agree with you. Santos had the back for several rounds, but in 3 of those rounds, she had single-digit strikes in them.
She got outstruck because, dude, Valentina was landing so flush over her head that it actually made Santos stop trying for the submission.
Let me posit a scenario. Let's say it's relatively even-ish on the feet. Maybe you're the slight better of me, right? Rocked my head back one time, but it's relatively even. But I take you down and I take your back, and I don't get close with a submission. It's hard for me to land meaningful ground and pound. Under the current rule set, you would probably win. And again, if the judge scored it that way, I would understand it. But to me, that is not the proper way to score.
I don't like the
grappling.
overcorrection.
We have turned grappling into sub-only grappling in MMA, and of course,
do you blame John Fitch for that in the end?
Hold on. And you can do damage with your fists as well, obviously. But in terms of the grappling part of it, dude, let me explain something to you. If I take you down, take your back, and I neutralize you. I have put you in a near, not only, but a near perfectly defensive position. I have the only position in all of MMA where I have asymmetry. You are facing one way, and I have your back. That is an extremely difficult thing to obtain, which I'm not saying you should award the difficulty of it, but if I can put you in a situation where you have to survive for 3 minutes and you can meaningfully not do much. Now, granted, if you're landing those kinds of things, that changes it. But if I had wrist control, let's say, and I was going for the throat or whatever, that should be counted more than the rules count
100%.
for.
So there's
I think we have majorly overcorrected.
We have